Today I'm going to do an introduction to carabiners. Specifically today we're looking at locking carabiners and which locking carabiners you should use in different applications and which are some of my favorite. So let's take a look here. Every one of these carabiners is a carabiner that I have owned, some of them for many years, and each have a strength and a weakness, and there's specific carabiners that I tend to buy more than others. First I'm going to try to define the different types of carabiners that we're looking at. So over here on the left side of your screen, we have locking Ds. These are called D carabiners because the shape, you can see this would be the back side of the D, and then the front of the D is a little bit like a capital D. D carabiners are nice because they can be very compact and very lightweight. So you can see this particular carabiner is very small and very light. So this would be a great carabiner for specific applications where you don't need to open and close the gate very much. It's going to be locked and stay locked for a long period of time because these small carabiners, especially if you're wearing gloves, can be a little bit more difficult to operate. So I like a carabiner like this, for instance, to attach my approach shoes to my climbing harness. Compact, lightweight, I'm not opening it and closing it very much at critical times. Over here we have pear-shaped carabiners. These large pear-shaped carabiners, or in this case it's actually a compact pear-shaped carabiner, are also called HMS carabiners. And HMS is an abbreviation for a German word. I'll do my best. Habmast. I can't remember. But essentially the German word stands for half clove hitch carabiner or half-mast device throwing carabiner. Something like that. Not that important, but just know that the half-clove carabiner, the half-clove is actually a munter hitch. So these particular shapes of carabiners are ideally shaped for application of the munter hitch, which becomes really important in rescue in particular, but can also be really nice in an alpine environment where you might be using the munter hitch to belay short distances. We have a lot of different types of locking mechanisms on these carabiners. I'm going to talk about two initially, which are probably the most common two types that you'll run into, and then a third type that offers a little bit more security, but also can be a little bit more annoying. So first, my favorite type of locking carabiner for most applications is simply a screw gate. A screw gate is just like it sounds, requiring a screwing action, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, and incidentally, the orientation of the carabiner is going to matter for how you anticipate what righty-tighty, lefty-loosey is. So on these HMS or pear-shaped carabiners, the top of the carabiner is the wide side, and with the wide side up, then it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. When the carabiner is in the opposite orientation, it's going to be lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. So just remember, the proper orientation of the carabiner when you're talking about righty-tighty, lefty-loosey is with the wide side up. Okay, same thing is going to be true of these Ds. There's a slightly wider side, so put the wider side up and the narrower side down. That becomes really critical in the event you overlock the gate and it is sort of frozen shut and you're trying to figure out which direction to screw that gate. So one important point on the screw gate carabiner in particular is you lock the gate using a light twist of your finger muscles and nothing more. You don't want to grip it and really crank that thing down because you may have a very difficult time getting that gate open again. My favorite screw lock carabiner in the D shape is this Petzl. I think it's called the SM''D, small d. I find Petzl does a really good job with the barrels. They're beveled down so you're not as likely to get as much grit in the end of it, versus this is a really awesome lightweight carabiner from Camp, but because the barrel of the locking mechanism is wide open, it tends to collect a lot of grit and wear out a little faster. So even though this is a little bit lighter weight than my Petzl model, I actually prefer the Petzl model a little bit more. Same thing over here. I have two carabiners in the pear shape / HMS shape that are my favorite. I really like the newer Petzl Attache Carabiner. As a general carabiner, I attach myself to multi-pitch anchors with this, and I use it for rescue quite a bit because of the HMS shape and because of that bevel on the barrel of the carabiner. And my favorite belay carabiner, especially for belaying from the top as a guide, I'm pulling a rope a lot through a device like an ATC guide or a reverso. Having a nice round stock on that is really, really nice at reducing wear and tear on my elbows. And the old style Attache Carabiner does a fantastic job. Camp has just come out with a new carabiner that has a pretty round stock on it as well. I bought a couple of those, but I haven't had an opportunity to use them. So this old style Attache, which are very difficult to find, is still my favorite for attaching to my belay device. Okay, we're going to look at another locking mechanism now. That locking mechanism is called a twist lock. So a twist lock sounds very similar to screw gate, but a twist lock carabiner has a spring action that automatically closes the gate. It requires a single twist between your thumb and forefinger and then pulling back to open the gate, and then it automatically locks itself. These types of carabiners I really like for critical pieces where I want to make sure that the gate always locks on its own. So for example, if you're using a personal anchor system or another sort of tether to attach yourself into the anchor, I really like a twist lock style carabiner for that application. An important note with the twist lock is that this action, if it rubs over a rock surface, in unlikely circumstances, can open on its own. So I typically don't use these as part of an anchor system that might be resting against the rock and moving across. I typically use it when it would be suspended in air away from a rock surface. The next type of locking mechanism we're going to look at is a tri-action lock or triple action locking carabiner. This is the classic triple action locking carabiner here. This is another Petzl product. You'll notice I cannot twist it open. I have to push it forward, twist it, and then press it back. So that's push, 1, twist, 2, pull, 3 actions. For a tri-action, triple action locking carabiner. This can offer a lot more security if you're just attaching your life to a system with a single locking carabiner. That might be common if, for instance, you have a bite knot somewhere in the middle of the rope that you're clipping into, or short roping applications for guides. It's pretty common to want to have a triple action style locking carabiner. This is a classic tri-action locker, but there are a lot of other systems that different companies have developed. The Magnetron, developed by Black Diamond, has 1 button on this side, 2 buttons on the other side, and then pulling to make 3 actions that's required to open that carabiner up. Very unlikely that would come unlocked on its own. So that's another great mechanism to look into. Keep in mind, each of these mechanisms and each of the manufacturers may wear out under different circumstances. So I found that this particular locking carabiner, the Magnetron, does really well in dry, cold environments, but in a wet, cold environment, this can get frozen shut very easily and is very difficult to unfreeze. You have to sort of stick your hand on it and wait a long time, which is one of the reasons that Gravel, which is really famous for ice climbing as a company, has developed this dual gate system where you have a wire locker, or excuse me, a wire opening here and then a solid gate opening here. Both of these mechanisms provide at least double protection, so at least 2 actions to create a locker, and neither of these gates is prone to freezing, even under really bad wet then cold conditions. So really great to consider the type of locking carabiner you're going to use in an alpine environment, or especially if you're going to go out ice climbing. That's a great carabiner to have for specific applications. Ice climbing. One of the really difficult things about locking carabiners with 3 actions or complicated actions is it's not easy to clip in and clip out of them. So if you're attaching yourself with a clove hitch at the anchor, for example, that can be really difficult. Just going to show a few of the other actions. This is another carabiner by Mammut. It requires a downward pull and an opening mechanism. Edelrid has this tri-action carabiner coupled with a steel gate, spring action at the bottom, wire gate that's intended to trap your belay loop so you prevent cross loading. Cross-loading on most carabiners is not as much an issue as people think. This particular carabiner, cross-loaded, is rated to 8 kilonewtons, so that's plenty strong for climbing applications, especially if you're in a top rope environment or if you're belaying a lead climber. Cross-loading that carabiner is not going to be an issue. Okay, and then the last locking mechanism I'll look at is a slide rot lock by Edelrid. I really like this locking mechanism. I find it creates a nice compact, very lightweight D-shaped locking carabiner where you slide back and you push forward, but I found that the durability of the function on the spring is really low, so these are liable to failing in the field, and I've had a couple of them fail just with getting a little bit of grit in there. The locking mechanism no longer functions. So this is true of all locking carabiners, but once you've loaded your rope inside and you've engaged the locking function, you want to do a check to make sure the gate is actually locked. And some carabiners, like these two Petzls, you can do an easy visual check because you can see that little bit of red that shows up. Camp has just come out with their own visual check, and there are some other companies out there as well that have a quick visual check that you can do without testing the gate. Hopefully this comes in handy when you're going out there and buying your own carabiners, and you can understand why you might want different carabiners for different applications. I wanted to address a situation that's fairly common in climbing, especially when you're starting out and you're not exactly sure what gear to bring, specifically on multi-pitch routes where you might need a little bit more gear. There are times when you might arrive at an anchor station, or you might arrive at a different location like the base of a pitch, and you want to be anchored, and you'd like to have a locking carabiner for that, but you didn't bring enough locking carabiners. So anytime you have two non-locking carabiners, you can always use two non-locking carabiners in replacement of a single locking carabiner. So what you'll need to do is clip those non-lockers into the anchor point that you'd like to anchor the rope to. In this case, I'm using this like a multi-pitch belay station. And when you clip those in, you want to clip them in so they're opposite and opposed. So that means that the gates are facing out opposite directions from one another when the carabiner is in the same orientation. So here, the carabiners are facing the same direction and the gates aren't opposite. Okay? Here, the carabiner's orientation is flipped and the gates are opposite. And here, the carabiners are opposite and opposed. So the carabiners are in the same orientation. And that reduces the likelihood that the rope will unclip from these carabiners significantly. So I will clip it and flip it, clip it and flip it, and now I can load these carabiners one at a time, one through, two through that clove hitch, and now cinch them down, and those two non-locking carabiners, opposite and opposed, have acted like a locking carabiner. Okay, the last thing that I'd like to talk about in terms of carabiners is how to properly handle them. So first, to talk about the parts of the carabiner, this is called the gate of the carabiner. This is the spine of the carabiner. This is the top of the carabiner. This would be the bottom of the carabiner. And again, this is an HMS or pear-shaped carabiner. So the proper way to handle a carabiner like this is to place the spine in the webbing between your index finger and your thumb with the carabiner up, so the wide part pointed to the sky, and grip the gate so you can easily pull it back with your index and your thumb. Okay? This I call the Captain Hook method because it gives you a sort of hook facing forward, just like Captain Hook, and it allows you to clip the carabiner into an anchor point quite easily. So for example, I can clip this in quite easily using this Captain Hook method. Okay? The next part, when you put a carabiner into an anchor, is you want to flip the carabiner over. So I call it clipping it and flipping it, and that pushes the gate up and out and away from the rock or the tree or whatever else you happen to be anchoring to. The other thing this allows you to do is easily clip in a rope or a sling or anything else, because the action of the gate allows gravity to drop it in. If the carabiner is clipped in a different orientation, for example, clipping this in becomes a little bit more difficult as you have to press through and lift. Okay. Another common problem with carabiners is, especially with the locking carabiners, I find people oftentimes have them on their harness, and while they're on their harness, they're locked down, which means it's difficult to unlock the carabiner and remove it from the harness. So while the carabiner is on your harness, you can think of your harness like a tool belt. You want to be able to access those tools easily, so it shouldn't be locked. After the carabiner is loaded with whichever you want to load it with, so in this example, I would like to load it with my rope, then I should lock it down. But if I lock it before I load the rope, then I just add myself an extra step of unlocking the carabiner and loading. So once again, remember, Captain Hook method: clip it, flip it, load it, lock it.